Today I will be discussing the federal laws that still affect schools today. The first one we'll be discussing is the Civil Rights Act of 1964. On July 2, 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. It is an act to enforce the constitutional right to vote, to confer jurisdiction upon the district courts of the United States of America, to provide injunctive relief against discrimination in public accommodations, to authorize the Attorney General to institute suits to protect constitutional rights in public facilities and public education, to extend the Commission on Civil Rights to prevent discrimination in federally assisted programs, to establish a Commission on Equal Employment Opportunities, and for other purposes. The bill was called for by President John F. Kennedy in his Civil Rights speech of June 11, 1963, in which he asked for legislation giving all Americans the right to be served in facilities which are open to the public. Hotels, restaurants, theaters, retail stores, and similar establishments, as well as greater protections for the right to vote. Kennedy delivered this speech following a series of protests from the African American community. The biggest protest occurred in Birmingham, Alabama. During the protest in Birmingham, students and children were attacked by police dogs and high-pressure fire hoses. Even though its influence wasn't as big in 1964, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 had a huge impact on future civil rights legislation in the United States. One act that influenced was the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. This act has been called the most important piece of federal legislation since the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It was influenced by the structure and substance of the previous 1964 Act. It would also go on to influence the Voting Rights Acts of 1965 and the Civil Rights Act of 1968 that also helped women. The second act that I will be discussing is the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. On January 8, 2002, President George W. Bush signed the act into law. It is an act that closes the achievement gap with accountability, flexibility, and choice so that no child is left behind. The No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 is the United States Act of Congress that is a reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The act requires states to develop assessments and basic skills. To receive federal school funding, states must give these assessments to all students at select grade levels. The act doesn't have a national achievement standard. Each state must develop its own standards. Supporters of the act believe that a huge positive of the bill increase accountability of schools and teachers. Schools now must pass tests every year to measure student improvement. Critics argue that the act made teachers narrow their focus on things that would be on national tests and not on the subject matter as a whole. The third and final act I will be discussing is Title IX. Title IX was signed into law by President Richard Nixon on June 23, 1972. The act states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activities receiving federal financial assistance. The 9 things to know about the Title IX are: number 1, Title IX is a landmark federal civil right that prohibits sex discrimination in education. Number 2, Title IX does not apply to female students only. Number 3, schools must be proactive, ensuring that your campus is free of sex discrimination. Number 4, schools must have an established procedure for handling complaints of sexual discrimination, harassment, or violation. Number 5, schools should ensure that a victim doesn't have to share spaces such as dorms, classes, and campus jobs with her assailant. Number 6, schools may not retaliate against someone filing a complaint and must keep a complainant victim safe from other retaliatory harassment or behavior. Number 7, schools can issue a no-contact doctrine under Title IX to prevent the accused student from approaching or interacting with you. Number 8, in cases of sexual violence, schools are prohibited from encouraging or allowing mediation rather than a formal hearing of the complaint. And finally, number 9, schools cannot discourage you from continuing your education.